morning. My name is John Sammon, and I came to the world of M2M by starting my own asset tracking company about 10, 11 years ago. And through those trials and tribulations, I can come and speak to you with some authority in a not quite so academic way. My company was acquired by ORBCOMM a year and a half ago. And I'm here to talk to you about remote monitoring and asset tracking. Okay. So the agenda for my presentation today is I want to start on a real high level, and some of this will be very intuitive. We've been hearing it the last day or so, talking about some of the global dynamics that are affecting the M2M space, and I like to call these levers or points of leverage. And then I want to talk about how these aspects are changing the different business sectors. Then I want to just take a quick shift into ORBCOMM and talk a little bit about the way we are approaching these changes and how it affects the markets and the types of offerings that we are providing. And then I'm going to drill down specifically into an application, which happens to be the application of the business that I started, talking about cold chain, refrigerator trailer tracking, and monitoring, remote monitoring. And I'll try to make some predictions about the future of asset tracking along the way. So, global dynamics in M2M, what we have here is different elements which are going down. For example, the cost of data, the latency of data, and data disruption. All of those elements are going down globally around the world. I like to tell this to customers as I've wrestled with very, very large fleets who are talking about doing their capital expenditures on putting devices on, and they say, yeah, but the cost of data is so cheap, everything's going down. Yeah, but unfortunately everything else is going up in cost. Energy costs are going up, labor costs are going up, raw materials, for example, rubber is going up, insurance and liability, safety, food safety, safety of workers, regulatory compliances. These are all elements that are driving up the cost of business. So as you look at asset monitoring and remote monitoring, keep in the back of your mind, you're looking for these shift points, the points where in any one of the sectors, whether it be transportation or heavy equipment or any of the other ones, where there's enough of these leverage effects going on such that the adoption rate will pick up, and that'll help you in your future looking statements, your future looking business opportunities for M2M. One more here. Okay, this next slide I'm going to build up. On the vertical axis, I wanted to do a 2x2 here. It's not showing up quite so well. On the vertical axis, what I wanted to have is the cost of business being low and high, and then I want to have on the horizontal axis the cost or the value of remote monitoring, and build up a 2x2 matrix here, which will put the different business sectors in place. And this is somewhat subjective, but from the way in which I have experienced this space, in talking about adoption, you have down here where the cost of implementing might be kind of low, as well as the value of monitoring is also low. We see consumer goods and technology in the financial services market. And then you have the low value for other markets and industries and business, but the cost is getting higher and higher. And then further out you have government and utilities, where the value starts to grow more and more over time. And then eventually you have these markets up in the upper right-hand corner here, such as oil and gas and mining and heavy equipment and industrial goods. And then what you see is a general shift of everything moving up into that quadrant. And in particular, and again, this is my experience, is we've had assets as trucking, shipping containers, trucks themselves. This is one of the points of regulatory coming into effect, cost coming into effect, labor coming into effect. And that's where we have spent a good portion of our time. So again, as I said, ORBCOMM has been in a position, historically we've been more of a network type service company with satellite service and now cellular service as well. But, for example, I'm not sure why I went back to the main slide.
No.
Oh, switch over? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Gotta get in sync here. So ORBCOMM, now with ORBCOMM is we've been on a path of acquisitions. And in so, we are looking at the various different markets of heavy equipment and transportation distribution, marine, government, and fixed assets. And the way we tend to look at these markets is the addressable markets. Heavy equipment is one where we have a tremendous amount of experience. We're tracking over 700,000 assets in this space. And the drivers here, the values here, is you have very, very expensive equipment which requires service and maintenance. And they're off in the hinterland, obviously, they need to be monitored, and the value prop is there. And again, the value propositions you can think about it being on multiple levels. In the case here, it's very easy because it's the OEM, and there's a warranty associated. So again, looking at those leverage points and where do they fit in. Transportation, we look at transportation and say there's about 88 million addressable assets. We are tracking roughly maybe 100,000 of those assets right now. And in there, again, you're looking for levers. You're looking for fuel, high-value cargo, refrigerated cargo. Marine, they're said to be 56 million. Government, they're said to be some 180 million assets. And then fixed assets, which is like oil and gas, another 70 million addressable assets. ORBCOMM is looking at addressing these assets in these markets through connectivity, through the engineering, through the hardware. We actually do contract manufacturing of hardware, sales and marketing, software as a service, and of course the recurring revenue. So that's ORBCOMM and the way in which we look at the world. I might want to point out as well that these markets up top, which is transportation, distribution, and heavy equipment, are the two areas where we have a lot of penetration. My business, which was acquired by ORBCOMM, is here in the transportation space, and I'm going to drill down in a moment on what the effects of asset monitoring is in those areas. But we're looking to play in all of these markets as accordingly, as they all have assets, they all require some element of remote monitoring, and all have their different leverage points, and they all have their different adoption curves based on what's going on with global dynamics. So, again, I want to move through this. Okay, so drilling down on a transportation example, the company that I started, which is now wholly owned by ORBCOMM, strong technical financial resources, tracking about 80,000 assets in the field. And then when I started my company, it was in a post 9/11 environment, and the very first opportunity was to track containers for the US government. That was not a sustainable business model, so we had to look for other types of assets that we could track, and naturally trailers came into play, and so did refrigerator trailers. And so quickly we began to look at the refrigerated markets, both in the over-the-road, in the distribution, and in the shipping containers. And then specifically, you go from this model of looking at the asset to looking at the actual product itself. These are some of the customers that we work with, and again, there's different value propositions depending upon who you're partnering with as a channel, depending upon their over-the-road, who owns the liability for the assets and the products, and what their value propositions are, and where they're going to be on that adoption curve of technology. There's the private fleets and their own particular interests as well, and then you have the shipping companies. And you're looking at elements of who pays for the liability, who owns the product at any one point in time in the supply chain, and trying to figure out the best way to present the value of the data and the value of the information to the particular stakeholder in the value chain. This is the technology matrix, as you might assume. We are integrated into what the DG is. It's called a data gate. We're integrated into the reefer itself. So it's a matter of working with the OEMs. In this case, it would be Carrier and Thermo King to get integrated into their actual assets themselves. And we're not only taking information out of the reefer, telling the world where the product is, where the truck is, whether the doors have been opened. We're also telling them the information about what's going on inside the asset, such as temperature and humidity. We have the ability to write down to it and change the temperature, power it on, change the dynamics. I'm not smart enough to know that we're not carrying ice cream, which has to have, you know, a below zero constant. We're carrying vegetables, so we can consume less fuel if we put it into a stop-start mode of refrigeration versus a steady-state mode of refrigeration. Those are the types of applications that you can do remotely with this type of technology. So conceptually, we went from, many companies have gone from, but specifically my company, went from looking at asset tracking, and it's all about the value of the asset. Where is it, and is it getting utilized? Do I have too many of them? Do I not have enough? Where are they? Is the driver misusing them? We have had examples about tires and all sorts of examples. Then we broke it down to a subsection of refrigerated. Well, those assets are even more expensive, and the utilization of them is even more important. And then eventually we got to a point of actually tracking the product itself. And what we did, or what we're doing in these applications, is we're monitoring the refrigerated asset, but we're also putting sensors on the food itself. And there's a big difference between your refrigerator telling you that it's set at a certain temperature versus the milk in your refrigerator telling you what it's at. And typical of what's going on in America right now is the regulatory forces are less interested in what the asset is telling you it has done. It's not as interested in the fact that you've done an audit trail and it says, hey, you know, my refrigerator told me that everything was copacetic. You know, everything was great throughout the trip. They want to know what the product is telling you. And so we advanced it one level down to say, okay, now we're offering actual product temperatures, the asset tracking monitoring elements that I already spoke to. So we're getting even a layer further down. So again, and this is a more concrete example. Again, this applies more to America, although I know that this is probably a global effect. But what we're seeing in the U.S., particularly Obama came in and in 2011 passed the Food Safety Modernization Act. Food Safety Modernization Act has language in it which says that anybody who's distributing certain food products needs to have an audit trail of the quality and the temperature of that product. So on the one hand, you have the FDA and you have the USDA, which are putting these forces on the transportation companies, saying, hey guys, you're going to have to do something here. It's not a matter of sitting back passively. We're letting you know in advance that these laws are on the books and we're going to enforce them. So then you have a reactionary effect from large brands. Large brands saying, okay, wait, we got to get out in front of this real fast. Some of the earlier ones are the ones that are represented here. So you have this push-pull effect, and it's creating a leverage. So you have elements of regulatory compliance here, which is driving adoption. And this has been a very interesting space to watch for us. On the one hand, we have, we look at volume as being a great metric for our business. We're tracking 800,000 assets, and isn't that wonderful? However, when you get into the value propositions of these types of applications, McDonald's in North America, you might think it's an enormous business from an asset perspective, but actually, the way in which they do business is the product is brought into the distribution centers, and then from the distribution centers, it goes out to the stores. And they're really only tracking probably about 5,000 trailers to their stores. But the amount of data that they're getting off of those trailers is quite remarkable, because the requirements that both Starbucks, McDonald's, and others has put on to companies such as ORBCOMM is, I need to know in real time, every minute or every 5 minutes as the case may be, what's the temperature of the frozen section of the trailer, what's the temperature of the refrigerator section of the trailer, and am I deviating to any degree below or above? And if so, what are my action items, and how do I take care of that? Again, this check kind of shows some of the ancillary information that we're getting off of these assets. Tire pressure is in there. Fuel is very important. The type of trailer that's connected to the type of tractor. Again, two-way communication back and forth is very important. It's not just a matter of knowing that there is a problem. It's a matter of being able to address that problem and correct it in real time. Not sure if this is very legible to you folks, but I'm going to go through a couple slides that shows the application. And the purpose of this is to show that ultimately, as everyone knows, it's about the application, and it's about the software, and it's about the data and the information. And nobody in this room seems to be all that interested in hardware, which is understandable, because there's nothing all that attractive about selling hardware except for the fact that it's the medium to the ends, and you have to have hardware that gets you to this level. But when you do get to this level, it becomes quite an interesting business model. We have assets and different assets that are doing different things over different times, and they're providing us different types of information. We can drill down on any one of these and pick up specifics, and we can sort this data in any way that we like, and then we can take data in, for example, routing data, and we can push data out, for example, temperature auditing. So what you might see, this happens to be a picture of the great state of Florida. And in Florida, if you're traveling down the center of Florida, you might be a distribution company, and you get up at 4 in the morning, and you load up your refrigerator trailer, and you have some frozen stuff, and you have some refrigerated stuff, and you have some dry stuff, and you're delivering to multiple different stores. Well, guess what? Each one of these brands, they have different requirements. So McDonald's needs to know that the product is within a certain temperature range over a certain period of time, and they want an alert and alarm if we go beyond that. Starbucks has similar but slightly different requirements for their products, and on so now you have a device which needs to have certain intelligence in the embedded system itself. It has to get fed up into an application, and then we have to be able to parse all this data and feed it to each one of these brands, so that when they go through their auditing process to make sure that the distribution company is delivering food in a safe fashion, that it all makes sense to them and their business model. So what you might have, for example, is you have an acceptable range of temperature, and then you have a product temp monitoring system that's actually physically placed. These can be wired temperature probes, or they can be wireless. And you end up with, at the end of the day, a red line here that hopefully stays within your acceptable band of temperature. If it deviates, you go to another page on the application, and you have the ability to say that, well, the driver rectified it by doing the following things. Or, for example, maybe there was something that was broke, or a door was left open. It's really meant to drive quality, more so than it's meant to be Big Brother watching, although the elements of Big Brother watching induces quality into the system. But this is the way in which, in the US, the large brands are using this technology to make sure that their products are safe. Again, it's proactive in real time. I've already made this point, but I wanted to make it again, which is that as folks sit here, and there's one other point that I wanted to make as well. This is a trend that we see all the time now. It's not enough to have an application. So an application like this is good for certain people. For example, the person who dispatched 100 trailers this morning in the United States, and they're looking for anomalies and whether or not the trucks are on their route and the product's safe and they're making the deliveries on time. However, Starbucks doesn't want to look at this. They don't want to spend their time looking through all this data. They need summary reports, and more often than not, what they need is an integrated data feed into their own applications where they're looking for anomalies. So while we build these applications, we're very proud of them, and they're our showpieces, and they're what we use for sales and marketing applications. Oftentimes, the data is being consumed at an enterprise level that is more germane and holistic to whatever the retail brand wants. But in fact, what is important about this application is this is where you will be able to proactively manage these assets. So when there is an anomaly, and when you see something jump out at you, this is the point where you can jump in and you can change the temperature, for example, or you can reach out to the driver, as the case may be. Again, similar points. The point here is that what we're doing is we're generating custom reports and sending them off on a daily basis. So again, you might want to think of this as there's many different stakeholders. There's, for example, the OEM of a product, there an asset or the actual product itself. There is the distributor or the dealer, as the case may be, whether it's product or it's the asset. And then you have the actual user and consumer, and then you may have other interested parties, such as the government or a large retail brand. And there's various stakeholders along the way. So you have to be able to build applications that can feed data appropriately, because as we get further and further into asset tracking and monitoring, we've come to realize that somebody cares about one thing deeply, but they just don't give a crap about anything else. So, you have to be able to parse this data very, very selectively. Again, this is by asset, by fleet, another example of what gets seen. And again, this example is somebody's coming in to audit their distribution center. Let's say the distribution center has 150 stores that it services, and each day you want to look at the routes and how well they're performing, and you bring up a report, and if there's any kind of an anomaly in the temperature, you get down into some sort of auditing capability. So wrapping up, as we look at the future of asset tracking and remote monitoring, obviously you're looking for this. It's pretty common sense to think that you're looking for these leverage effects. What I would say is that this is one example, and I can think of several more where the cost of everything that's going up is being measured against the cost of M2M data going down. So as you look at asset utilization, management, and control, cost of fuel, cold chain food safety compliance, actual regulatory acts that are coming into effect, and the cost of technology is declining, the value of the information is growing quite a bit. And so, with ORBCOMM, we're heavily focusing on these types of dynamics, looking to have the right technologies and platforms to service these dynamics as they evolve, because it's all a matter of really hitting these adoption curves at the right time. Hitting them too soon, you can live through years of, hey, this is great value, but you just don't get the adoption that you need, or you can hit them a little too late, in which case you're competitively at a disadvantage. So as we look at those 5 huge markets of assets, we're trying to find these niches or these areas where the levers are taking place, the adoption is evolving, and we're there with the right technology to address it. So thank you for your time, I appreciate it.